am so excited to be live at the Light of the Infinite Festival. Such an amazing opportunity. Erez has such an incredible crew, such a great lineup going on. I'm so excited to be here and share with you guys one of my favorite topics, which is connecting to the Adamah, connecting to the earth, and what does the Torah have to say about our relationship to nature. So tonight, it's Motzei, Rosh Chodesh Adar, or wherever you are in the world, you might still be in Rosh Chodesh Adar. Such beautiful light, really great opportunity, and I'd love to just discuss some of these ideas, because I think traditionally we don't think of Judaism as necessarily the most earthy, kind of hippie in that way, and I think part of that is because we have been uprooted from our land for 2,000 years, and we lost some of those land-based practices. And we're returning, and I think a lot of that wisdom has always been there, and we're bringing it back up and out, and it's really exciting. Okay, but before we jump in, I want to jump into all kinds of different things, looking at it from a pshat perspective, looking at it from halachically, looking at siprei masiot, all kinds of Hasidic stories. There's a lot of different ways to approach this topic of the sacred practice of connecting to nature through Judaism. But before we do that, I want to, just if we all want to center and connect to the tzaddikim and the tzaddikot, and may all the light that we gather and harvest tonight be for the elevation of the neshama of Frida Levana Bat Shalom. What a beautiful name, and what a beautiful neshama. Just saying her name out loud is just such sweetness. We have so much nachat and so much elevation from this evening, and from our learning together and our gathering of souls together. And let's just touch on that incredible name for a moment, right? Because Frida is beauty, Levana is the moon, right? The Yarech is the Levana. It's also my Safta's name, was my Safta's name. Bat Shalom, the daughter of peace. Wow, right? And the moon is a symbol of the feminine, of a vessel. Just like the earth is connected to very feminine vessel, receptive energy, right? These notions, these relationships of feminine and masculine, right? Like the feminine receives, but she also gives. The moon doesn't have light of her own necessarily, but she's constantly also giving. So just like that, the earth also. And the beauty of the moon, right? And we're doing Tikkun HaLevana, and we're in the age of all of these beautiful notions, really changing and coming to their full fruition. So, so I just thought it was interesting, and we just did Birkat HaLevana. Okay, but there's a lot of topics to get into. But before we start and go too deep down the rabbit hole, let's open with one of my favorite essays of Rav Avraham Yitzchak Cohen Cook, who was also known as the first chief rabbi of pre-state Israel. He's also the chief rabbi of Yafo at one point, which some people might say is even more exciting than all of Israel. Yafo people might say that. Okay, so let's start with this, and then we're going to dive into a whole bunch of other approaches to the earth-based wisdom of our ancestors, yo. Oh, and by the way, my name is Hilla. I don't know if I mentioned that, but yeah, whatever. I could talk a little bit about how I got to where I am, and my journey with the environmental movement afterwards. All right. So he writes, "There is one who sings the song of his own life, and in himself he finds everything, his full spiritual satisfaction. There is another who sings the song of his people. He leaves the circle of his own individual self because he finds it without sufficient breadth, without an idealistic basis. He aspires towards the heights, and he attaches himself with a gentle love to the whole community of Israel. Together with her, he sings her songs. He feels grieved in her afflictions and delights in her hopes. He contemplates noble and pure thoughts about her past and her future and probes with love and wisdom her inner spiritual essence. There is another who reaches towards more distant realms and goes beyond the boundary of Israel to sing the song of mankind. His spirit extends to the wider vistas of the majesty of humanity generally and his noble essence. He aspires towards man's general goals and looks forward towards his higher perfection. From this source of life, he draws the subjects of his meditation and study, his aspirations and his visions. Then there's one who rises towards wider horizons until he links himself with all of existence, with all God's creatures, with all worlds, and he sings his song with all of them. It is of one such of this tradition that tradition has said that whoever sings a portion of song each day is assured of having a share in the world to come. And then there's one who rises with all of these songs in one ensemble, and they all join their voices. Together they sing their songs with beauty. Each one lends vitality and life to the other. They are sounds of joy and gladness, sounds of jubilation and celebration, sounds of ecstasy and holiness. The song of the self, the song of the people, the song of mankind, and the song of the world all merge in him at all times, in all hours. And this full comprehensiveness rises to become the song of holiness, the song of God, the song of Israel, in its full strength and beauty, in its full authenticity and greatness. The name Yisrael stands for Shir-E, right? The song of God is a simple song, a twofold song, a threefold song, and a fourfold song. It is the song of songs, of Shlomo, which means peace or wholeness. It is the song of the king, in whom is wholeness. And I love this so much, right? Because it talks about this beautiful evolution. Like, yeah, some of us are really absorbed into the individual experience, the psyche, the emotional experience of individuals. And then others are like part of this community. And some others feel really attached to all of humanity and then all of creation, but that this move we're moving towards is uniting all of those at all times, is learning to connect to the song of all existence in all of her different levels. And I think it's really important, as we're in Ikavata de Mashiach, we're in these beautiful times as the Mashiach is like slowly dancing her way or his way or their way. Some say it will be a couple. Right? And that even that term, Ikavata de Mashiach, right, means like the heels of the Mashiach. The heel is where our body meets the earth. And so I think there's a hint there. There's a remez saying connect to the earth, connect to the body, connect to the vessel, connect to the feminine. And the more that we can do that, then the more we can elevate. And the more we can reach a higher consciousness, the more we can bring that higher consciousness down into our day-to-day, into our being, into our communities, into our households, into our schools, right? Because at the end of the day, Judaism is an earth-based religion, right? Our rabbis, our masters, they don't tell us, oh, put aside all these worldly experiences and just meditate on a mountain and just forget about our physical existence here. No, right? Judaism's all about taking the material and elevating it with the spiritual and combining, right? Doing unifications, doing ichudim between them. And the earth being our biggest vessel, most of the material that we explore and live around is physically on the earth, right? So she is our vessel. And the more we can create space and the more we can sanctify her, then we are creating space for Hashem's presence to reside, literally here. So let's talk about like really practical ways that the Torah recommends that we do that, because this is not esoteric. This is not, right? Lo b'shamayim hi. Our spiritual practice is not in the heavens. Our spiritual practice is down here in very earthly matters. I think, and we saw that whoever follows the Parshiot, we saw that very clearly. Right, 2 weeks ago we read Parashat Yitro, where we received the 10 Commandments, and we were on Har Sinai, and it was very dramatic. We were seeing lightning and we were hearing thunder. We were hearing lightning and seeing thunder. And we were having an incredibly spiritual experience. And then last week's Parsha, Mishpatim, it got real specific. It went from up on the mountain with all of Hashem's glory, and we saw Hashem, and and the Zohar says our souls left our body and it returned. And then right after, we go straight into, all right, now if your ox is in his field and your ox ate his field, then what are we going to do about that? And if you dig a hole and your ox fell in the hole, right? Like we very quickly went from Shemayim, from the heavens and this like beautiful revelation of light, to very, very specifics of the earth, of if you're digging up a hole and someone's ox falls in and you're hurting people's private property or hurting public property, you gotta, pay that. And so all of Judaism, right? We've got Teriyag, Mitzvot, and they're all about bringing it as far down as we can go, right? Which means we have so much potential to create Kedusha through nature. Our entire planet is just there for us to find and make space for holiness, for light, for good, for tov, right? Okay, so what are some of the ways that the Torah very practically is telling us to do it? Okay, well, if we're talking about, let's say, the Parshiot, then we have in Parshat Mishpatim, we have if your enemy's donkey is carrying a heavy load, go help that donkey out. Don't just watch an animal suffer on your watch. Even if you're far away, the Torah says, go run and help that donkey out, right? So we have a lot of lessons throughout the Torah and in the Gemara about this concept of rachamim, have mercy. See the glory that is Hashem's creations. Like, understand that you are not necessarily above them. You are here to help them. You are here to have, to like do the hard work of recognizing that Hashem's light is shining in that donkey right now, right? So another example of rachamim is also in Shiluach HaKen, right? Shiluach HaKen is the mitzvah of shooing away a mother bird before you take her eggs. If you're going to take her eggs, then you better shoo her away first. And there's lots of different parshanim that have different opinions on this. The Rambam says this is to not create tsar, to not create suffering. And the Rambam even goes a few steps further, and he says, do not get confused. Do not think that the suffering of an animal is any less than the suffering of a human. He really equates that animal suffering is like human suffering, and therefore they both have an isur. And if we go back to Shiluach HaKen, right, the act of shooing away mother bird before taking her eggs, Rabbi Bachya says something really interesting about this, is that he says this is in order to prevent animal extinction. Do not kill 2 generations of an animal on the same day. Do not kill both the mother and her offspring, because that could lead to animal extinction. And so we have these beautiful pirushim, but Hashem, the Torah, Judaism is reminding us that, hold on, if the goal is to not create animal extinction, let's talk about other things that are creating animal extinction. Species extinction, not just animals, right? So our animal agriculture, our meat industry, that is one of the major causes of species extinction right now. Fossil fuels, another reason that we are facing. So animal extinctions and mass extinctions. And so what most rabbis are not necessarily talking about, but that means that preventing those things is a mitzvah. Preventing those things is Kedushat Hashem. Preventing those things is part of the reason that we are on this planet and in these bodies to begin with, is to prevent animal suffering, is to prevent species extinction, is to see how trippy and how beautiful God's world is at every turn, whenever we can. Something interesting that came up for me today, right? The new moon of Adar just kind of just like the nice little sliver came out. And I was thinking about Birkat HaLevana, right? We bless nature all the time in Judaism. We've got Birkat HaLevana. Next month, we've got Birkat HaIlanot. We're going to bless the trees, the fruit-bearing trees. We have a blessing for lightning and thunder. We have a blessing for seeing a rainbow. We have a blessing for just seeing a really beautiful view. You're going skiing and you see beautiful mountains. We've got a blessing for that. So if we have blessings, right? If Kedushat Hashem is present in the natural world, and if nature leads us to praising Hashem's name, then wouldn't environmental destruction by that same midah, by that same count, wouldn't environmental destruction be a chilul Hashem? Meaning anything that we're doing to combat that is Kedushat Hashem, right? So it's like a lot of these nuances, and it's throughout the Torah. There's a beautiful story of Rav Kook walking in a field with his friend, a fellow rabbi. And the rabbi's telling this story. He says, we were just walking in a field, and I picked a thorn, because, walking in a field. Why not? And Rav Kook says to him, I've made it a point in my life to never just randomly pluck a living plant. A plant that would have continued creating life force around it. Because every plant has its story, and has its wisdom, and has its secrets. And I think there's so much to learn from that. That it's not just necessarily about, it's for us. It just is. It just is holy. It just is sacred. Etzem itself, right? In and of itself. Okay, so back to more examples that we can find in the Tanakh of sanctifying the natural world. I love this one because I studied community development and urban planning, and this is Hashem just being like, I'm going to help you do some urban planning. But migrash, there's a concept called migrash, which when discussing the different nachalot of the different shvatim, of the different tribes, the Levites live in cities. And so in the Tanakh, it is instructed that the Levite cities have a green belt around it, have what is called a migrash, have natural space, that part of it is just for agriculture or animal husbandry, and part of it is just completely untouched nature. And Chazal say not only is this for Levite cities, this is for any city. Needs to have a green belt around it, needs to have green spaces, which today a lot of us live in and around cities. We know that like a city that has greenery is a city we want to live in, right? Scientifically, we know it's better for us and it's healthier for us. The Torah is literally telling us, like, if you want to live in cities, cool, that's great. Make sure to create green spaces for your well-being, for the well-being of the planet, and for the well-being of the animals. Like, just for everyone. So that's an example that I really love. And of course, we know that Judaism is also an agricultural religion, right? And anything that we're doing is also we're sanctifying it through giving it, right? So we've got mitzvot of orla, we've got mitzvot of shmita, we've got masrot, right? Like, we're constantly involved in how can I take this material, beautiful, natural species and give it its space of kedusha, give it its opportunity to be holy, because it is. It's not just an apple. It's an emanation of godliness. And I want to take this and I want to bring it down. because, right, like we all love Hasidism, and it's about bringing it down. It's about bringing it down to day, and not leaving spiritual concepts to just like flow around. So I want to kind of like, the next stage is like, okay, how can we live this? How can we be a living Torah, right? It's chaim hi, right? The Torah is literally a tree of life. And how can we breathe life into our spiritual practice? How can we breathe life into our environmental practice? And so I just wanted to share some ways that I believe are really influential in that mitzvah of taking care of the planet. And I guess I'll give a really quick background on myself. I've been involved in the environmental movement about 12 years. I started studying, originally looking into how can we reduce poverty. I grew up in New York in the 90s. I saw a lot of poverty. And I understood that the environment is a really crucial way to help mitigate issues of impoverishment, right? Because when someone has no water and someone has no food, and if agricultural yields are going to be less, and if rainfall is going to be less, and et cetera, then we really can't treat poverty without making sure that we have the basic natural resources. So I got involved in that about 12 years ago. I studied sustainable development, and then went down to South America. I was working with communities in several countries in South America. Ended up realizing that I don't have to go too far to discover what it means to really unite with the land. And I got really into Judaism and started keeping Shabbat and mitzvot down when I was living in South America. Actually, a funny story that an engineer in the mountains there was like, "Oh, you're Israeli. What are you doing here? What are you doing in Ecuador? Like, go to Israel and then sell us drip irrigation systems," because they had just started experimenting with drip irrigation in Ecuador at the time. And I was like, light bulb, right. Israel has great innovation and great environmental innovation. So I eventually left Ecuador, finished my job there, and made Aliyah. And then I've been involved in a lot of activism, both in the United States, a little bit in South America, and in Israel. And working in the private sector, looking at ways to mitigate climate change using innovation and community organizing, and nonprofits and government. And basically I've done it. I've really tried exploring the environmental movement in many different ways. And now what speaks to me so much is just like how the Torah has so many tools to teach us her wisdom. So, but let's get down to like practicals. Okay, so what are some of the ways that we can minimize our environmental footprint, right? Because I think if we're living in the age of an ecological crisis, and I think the Torah tells us, as we just spoke, to be responsible towards the environment is part of your embodiment of Hashem's grace in this world. So I know people are like, don't touch my plate. Talk about whatever, just don't touch my dinner plate. But one of the best ways to reduce your environmental footprint is by reducing your meat intake. All animal agriculture is very problematic on the planet, but specifically meat is incredibly environmentally intensive. That's because cows are very inefficient beings. Okay, some vegans hate when I say that. It's like, don't blame the cows. It's like, okay, no, but in simple language, like cows do not. They need a lot of resources and they give very little resources. And our planet can't sustain that right now, as we have officially reached the 8 billion mark. As of right now, our animal agriculture industry occupies about a third of the fresh water on planet Earth. and about a third of the non-ice land is going towards rearing animals and growing food for animals. And in impoverished countries, about 70% of the food goes towards animal agriculture and not towards humans. So really one of the greatest ways that we can reduce our very personal carbon footprint is by reducing our intake of animal agriculture. And for those people who are saying, but it's Shabbos, I need my meat on Shabbos, I'm just going to remind you that the halacha is oneg. The rabbis do tend to say that oneg is and simcha kebasar v'yain, but they're actually referring to the Beit HaMikdash when they refer to meat in that context. So we can have oneg Shabbos without meat. Give it a try, like just one Shabbos, like try not meat and see how it is, and let me know and hit me up. Investing, if you're investing your money, invest in green businesses, because right now our economy, most businesses are extracting lots of fossil fuels and raw materials. Educate yourself. There is a thing called a circular economy, and there are governments that are trying to implement the circular economy into their economic models. And that means not using raw resources. It means recycling and upcycling as much as possible, right? And we can get very Hasidic about that, right? Because circular economy, the circle is the feminine, is the mother that holds, right? Is the malchut that holds all the rest of the sphirot. And capitalism, as it is right now, is very linear. It's just take and throw out, right? As we all know from our shoes or our clothes or what it is not. And so we need to turn that economy into a more circular economy. So just doing research, just looking into what are the different ways that I can be reducing my carbon footprint in a local way, right? There's our communities, and then there's a very global way too in terms of my consumption and my money. And I do recommend looking into also decision makers. Who are the decision makers that you are voting for? Again, it could be a community council, or it could be the president, or prime minister, or coalition. And this is not about like left, right? If you want to vote for people who have never necessarily shown environmental stewardship before, that's a choice. But I would really recommend saying to that decision maker, Chaver Knesset, if you're in Israel, or senator, if you're in the States, you can write to them, write to your representatives and say, listen, I voted for you, I like you, I want to keep voting for you, but this is really important. And I'm just a quick reminder that your job is to represent me. And I'm saying that the environment is important. So decision makers are open to changing their perspectives, but they need to know that that's what the public wants. I really recommend joining social movement or environmental movement, because that is a large-scale way to show our decision makers what's important to us. I've spoken to a lot of decision makers here in Israel, and they said, yeah, I'm all about that new environmental policy, but I need help getting it through Knesset. How do we help them get it through Knesset? They said, yeah, like make noise, dress up in silly costumes and come to the Knesset and do a protest and talk to the do some PR around it, talk to your local newspaper about it. And that's what our decision makers are asking for. They're asking for support. They're asking for solidarity and unity. And if we're going to talk about protesting and Hasidic masters, then I'll bring in Harav Abraham Yehoshua Heschel, right, who, after protesting the civil rights movement alongside Martin Luther King, said, it felt like my feet were praying. Right, like this is Kedushat Hashem. This is part of what's being asked upon us when Hashem gave us the privilege of being a human with a lot of power. Is to choose responsibility, is to choose stewardship, and I think it's really easy to forget that because of Galut. For 2,000 years, we were really busy with a Galut mindset, with diaspora and diaspora concerns. And how are we going to save Judaism in the face of this assimilation. But we're in a new dawn, we're in a new age, and there's an evolution, and we've evolved back to being on this land, and we have an opportunity to get back into being a land-based religion, an earth-based religion, an agricultural religion, one that says ma tov, like what, right? Like literally just by looking at a flower and seeing that godliness in the flower, we're able to return that spark. The spark that in the Big Bang, on using scientific words, the sparks that have landed. We can elevate those sparks just by looking at a flower and saying, damn, you holy. And I recently learned that Perach is Gematria 277, which are the original sparks, shards of that first explosion when the earth was created. So, Michael L'Chael, we're in Adar, so there's a lot of hidden to reveal in this month, and we're going from hidden miracles in Adar to revealed miracles of Nisan. And I think with environmental stewardship and just blessing the ground, we have so much opportunity starting now in Adar. I learned an interesting shiur, and in this we're going to wrap up. But I heard Rav Scheinberger, Shalita, may he live, gave a shiur on Adar, and spoke about how Adar is like the lowest. In some ways, it's the last month of the year, right? Again, we've got a different calendar than the Gregorian calendar. In the Jewish calendar, Adar is the last month. Guys, we've made it to the last month. And to some degree, there's some degree of lowliness to that. I'm not going to go into too much of the like Kabbalistic concepts behind it, but so there was this, that was a reason that Haman scheduled the extermination of the Jewish people on Adar, because this is a low month. What he didn't know is that what is low, right, is also connected to the highest, right? So for those who are familiar with the Sefirot, where there's Malchut is connected to Keter. It is connected to the highest point. And same with Adar. It may seem like we're low and just at the bottom of this whole year, but we're really just touching the start of the next level, of the highest level. So we're actually at one of the highest places, right? And that's how everything kind of did like a nahafochu, or one of the ways. And I think with the earth, it's very similar. Like the earth may seem like the lowliest place, just like dirt and a puddle, but where there is lowliness is that same point is the highest. So maybe connect, maybe see the highness in things that feel low, whether it's in our personal lives, struggles that, we feel like we're hitting rock bottom. Maybe see that we're just growing from there, like little sprouts deteriorating, and just growing upwards. And maybe have faith that there's a lot of hidden, and that there's a lot of good that's hidden in there. And maybe go from chayil to chayil, from strength to strength, in our ability to see godliness in all kinds of new ways that we never knew. And maybe find new kochots, new ways that we want to take on actions, right? New actions to revealing more light in the world. And may it come sweetly and with a lot of simcha. So thank you so much, Light of the Infinite, for having me. Erez, keep checking out the rest of the festival. There's just such amazing healers and musicians and teachers on here. Thanks for visiting, and I'd love to be in touch, and I'd love to continue this conversation on all different levels. So reach out to me. My information should be on the website. Yeah, Shavuot.